All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Anchor Point Podcast. Happy New Year. Today on the show, I've got the legendary Riva Duncan. See, I had to give you a grand entrance, since it's the first of the year, we got to kick it off right.
Yeah, pressure's on though.
I wouldn't worry about it too much. So Riva, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you, Brandon?
I'm excellent. I am actually in my new studio, which is still in the works, but my studio is just the spare bedroom. That's instead of the living room.
Looks good. Looks professional.
It's good setup. Yeah. So my wife and I just, we actually closed on our house over Christmas, and it's been a busy holiday thing. Had COVID. It was fun. What about you? What was your holidays like?
Pretty quiet. Actually, the first time in my life, I did not spend Christmas with my family.
Really?
So that was a little bit of a bummer. The COVID, I've got a couple of high-risk family members. They live all the way across the country in the East, and I just couldn't take the chance. And so just spent a pretty nice, quiet, chill Christmas at the house. So yeah, it was different, but necessary.
Yeah, man, I can't wait till this COVID thing I cannot wait till it's done. Like, I hope everybody gets their vaccine. Speaking of vaccines, are you going to get a vaccine or try to at least?
Oh, yeah. I'd get it yesterday if I could. But now that I'm retired, I'm no longer a first responder, right? Oh. I'm not high risk. So I'm back to the end of the line. That's okay. So I'm hoping to get it by April or May. We'll see.
Yeah. So. I'm trying to get my grandmother in there right now. And it's tough to get anybody in there right now.
Right.
So even first responders, even if you're bumped to the front of the list, it's not a guarantee.
No.
Yeah. Well, anyways, enough BS and tell us about yourself.
So I started in 1989 with the Forest Service in Region 9, so back east in the Northeast, and was actually the first demo hire on my forest. That was when demo was just starting, and was hired as a forester trainee. And loved it, got in the Forest Service, but the Allegheny National Forest is an asbestos forest, not a lot of fire going on there. And so we'd literally have 5 fires a year on my district. That was about it, if we were lucky.
That does
so
not
it was a big
like
deal. Fun. Yeah. And then it literally took till 1994 for me to be able to go on a Western fire assignment. As those of us older remember, we didn't have big fire seasons every year back then. And so 94, we all know, was a big fire season, and they were tapping crews from the Eastern United States, and got to go on a Type 2 IA crew. And that was my first, full 3-week assignment, Western assignment on a Type 2 IA crew. And I just was hooked. I was like, this is for me. And so, that was kind of the beginning, and trying to then get out of forestry and, and more into full-time fire. So I went on the Asheville Hotshots.
Nice.
And 96, and then went to Florida, worked in Florida for 5 years, which was just a freaking blast, because all year round fire season, my district alone, we prescribed burned 100,000 acres a year. The only month we did not prescribe burn was March. And so that's where I just learned so much about fire behavior, and really grew to love fuels and prescribed burn, and bought and drank the Kool-Aid about all of that, good fire. And and so then went from there to Utah. I went to the Uinta Wasatch Cast as a fuel specialist. From there, I went to the Klamath as Chief 2. Then back east to the National Forest in North Carolina as the Forest FMO. And then in 2017, ended up back in the West on the Umpqua National Forest, where I just retired on December 31st.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome. You said something pretty interesting right there. Regarding like big fire seasons, right? You've never had a big fire season until that big one of 94. And we all know that's the year of South Canyon. That's what happened that year, right?
Right.
Kind of setting a precedent as far as a tragedy fire goes. And we predicate a lot of our SOPs off of these tragedy fires, unfortunately. What else have you seen change in your years of fire, because you've got some salt in the game. You've been around since '89, right?
Yeah.
You've seen it all. So what are you seeing currently with the fire regime from then to now?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think most of us in this profession are starting to see and understand the role of climate change. We can argue the causes. I'd rather not, because that, I think there's still some controversy there. But we know it's happening. We're starting to see the longer fire seasons, right? The larger fires, the harder to control fires. And so seeing that as a gradual, since I've been in that long, and seeing that as felt more gradual, and kind of saw that was coming. So, going from where a big fire, like we were just turning in our fire experience records, right, to fire training. And we were looking at the responder sheet you fill out, and you write down the fires you run this year and the class. And it's A, B, C, D, E, I think, are the 5 classes of a fire. So like an A is less than an acre, right? The largest is 500 acres or more. And someone said, maybe we need to adjust the class of the fires because, at one time that was a big fire and now that's like nothing.
Yeah, it's nothing now.
Yeah, nothing. And so that's kind of funny, to look at the swarm that hasn't evolved with that. But we didn't, when we talk about people and getting fire experience, it took a lot of those. You had to wait a couple of years for that big fire season, right? And so to get the campaign fire, the project fire, and maybe work on some of your quals. And that certainly accelerated. And when you hear some of the old farts complain about the younger generations and, I always well, they're getting more fires, about them being fast tracker. Well, it took me 15 years to get division and this guy's got it in 5. Well, yeah, he's fighting these huge freaking fires all year round, or at least a big part of the season. They're getting more opportunities to get that experience. So that certainly changed. I think, obviously, we can look at the South Canyon's a great example of how the agencies did investigations after a tragedy fire or a large escape prescribed fire. It was the witch hunt. It was the horrible. It was sometimes enduring the investigation was, I've heard people, I've been on a bad escape prescribed fire, and that was almost more traumatic than the event. Right. And so those were dark days, I think. And if people study South Canyon, there was one of the team members, Ted Putnam, and he was a kind of a human factor specialist, which nobody heard of, nobody talked about back then. He refused to sign the report because he saw that they were blaming the firefighters who died or survived, right? And he knew that was really, really messed up. And he was like, these are human beings. We make mistakes. We're fallible. They were doing anything anybody else would do. And now we're blaming them for this. And he's like, I won't sign it, which was huge at the time. If you get your hands on an original copy of the South Canyon report, his name's on it and the signature line, and there's no signature.
It's left blank.
It's left blank. And man, I was like, that guy's my hero, right? This guy is standing up saying this is wrong. And he could have had some pretty serious consequences to his career, but he was, towards the end of his career, extremely well respected. He later wrote about it. It took people like him to say, this is wrong what we're doing. This is wrong what we're doing to people. And this isn't the way to go about it. And I think that was also then one of that and 30 Mile were the big shifts away from blaming and investigations and ruining people's careers to a learning culture. So I would say just the shift from investigations to more of a learning culture is probably, to me, one of the most important pivotal changes we've seen, a good change. We've made a lot of progress with it. There's still some work to do on that. But when I was on the Uinta Wasatch Cache, we had a really bad escape prescribed fire. We smoked in Salt Lake City. They had to cancel a BYU football game. they almost closed the Salt Lake City airport. I mean, it was a bad deal. We burned 8,000 acres onto private land. Luckily, nobody got hurt. We didn't lose any structures. And we had the good old fashioned investigation, and they did the kind of looking at the fire and the burn plan and all that. And then they did an administrative investigation to determine disciplinary action. And I remember getting a call, and I was the ignition specialist, and said, "Oh, you're scheduled for an interview." It was right before Thanksgiving, and you have to go to the Marriott, and literally it was an investigator with an actual badge. And I had to
like
swear.
A law enforcement badge?
Yeah. And two people in this hotel room to take my statement to determine the punishment that we would get. And I was like, this is messed up. Nobody told me this was coming. I mean, nobody told us that was the next step. I had no idea. And so I go in this little hotel room and get the badge and the swear, and they start taking my statement, and they didn't know anything about fire. And that was fucking horrible. And I think it was the first one of the group to get my interview. And I didn't have any disciplinary action. I'd tell you if I did, but the burn boss, I think he gotten his quals knocked back. The district ranger actually got a letter. And I think those were the only two disciplinary action that came out of it. Those of us practitioners, except for the burn boss, but he was a district ranger. He wasn't full-time fire. He was a type 1 burn boss. He was actually a district ranger in a neighboring district. But anyway, so that was my first example into the terrible world of investigations. And I was just like, this is messed up. We're out here trying to do really good work. And, we had a mishap, we had a wind shift and a problem. And yeah, so I had, from working in Florida with all the prescribed fire, if we had an escape, it was no big deal. If the fire crossed the swamp or jumped the road, we just burned the next compartment out. And I was used to that. I was used to, well, you just catch it at the next road, just catch it at the next thing, right? Because the work is important, and what we do, this is important work. And so then I go to Utah, and it was completely different. And I was just like, what's happening here? So I became pretty vocal about it, pretty outspoken, and actually spoke at FUTA and a couple of meetings. And I was just like, this is just BS. This is crap. And I think a few people listened. and it was all part of then, like I said, then Kramer Fire happened, I think a year or two later, right? And that was also that was same region I was working in, and same kind of thing. People got, I think, there were some bad things that went down there, and one guy literally had charges against him and ruined his career. And so then 30 Mile wasn't that long after, and we all know the shit show that was. And so anyway, so enough people in the right positions, were just like, we just can't keep doing this. This is wrong. And we've got to do right by people, and we've got to have people not be afraid to tell us what happened, and not be afraid to speak up and say, I learned this, or could have done it better this way. And so yeah, kind of a long story there, but I think that's been a pretty big deal. And the people who didn't work under those conditions and didn't experience that, they've only heard the stories, but I think those are really dark days for the fire service back then.
And that's one topic that you brought up here too, is like, you've seen the way things don't work. You've seen the tragedies, right, the absolute horror stories, like you're saying. I mean, I know I could probably name 5 or 6 ICs off the top of my head, at least in my region, that carry personal liability insurance. Mm-hmm. Just because of these things, because they're always, I mean, the investigation process, it's like you said, it's hardcore. It's a witch hunt, and they're looking for someone to blame, to alleviate, I guess, agency responsibility, potentially.
Right.
I mean, maybe.
Right.
I don't know. But that's the thing, though, is like, you've seen what hasn't worked in the past, and you've seen what makes things better. So what works, what doesn't work?
Well, I think, if people have studied just culture, learning cultures. There's some great books out there, Reason and things. And if we talk about a learning culture, and we all talk about that, right? FLA, we're a learning culture. Well, it's lip service unless you're really a learning culture. And you can't be a learning culture unless you have a just culture. And that's a place where people feel safe to say, I screwed up. I made a mistake. Could have done it differently, right? And not force them to do it, but make it where people volunteer to speak up about their own mistakes or to have a good discussion about what could have been done differently. And, AARs are a great example of the kind of first initial shift to that. And, but to hold it within the group, right? The group who experienced it. So there's not a fear of reprisal coming from outside that group. And so I think that the right way to do it is, and again, you can't just say, well, we're a learning culture and it's a just culture. You have to show it. You have to make it a safe place for people to speak up and not have consequences and not have reprisal and not have it affect their career. And it becomes very obvious if you're working in an environment that maybe only talks about it, but doesn't, walk that talk. And there's still people out there who want someone to blame, who want someone to be held accountable and to pay the price. And I just tell people to run screaming from those bosses or managers or line officers. That's not the place to work. And so what works is the people also involving the people who were involved in the mishap to learn from it and maybe change the things that need to be changed. And, because it used to be the GS Fantastics who were going, well, we got to change this. We need to do this. And they'd never asked the people who were actually doing the work or experienced the bad day, right? And I think that has shifted too. We see more diversity in these really critical working groups and, asking the hotshot soups. And, this past year with COVID is a really great example. I was on some Zoom meetings and Teams meetings that some of the Nemo folks had set up to get lessons learned. And they were asking engine captains and hotshot soups to get on these calls with, command and general staff from the Nemo groups and agency administrators. What's working? What's not working? A lot of the logistical stuff. What can we do better? And so to shift to actually ask the people who are experiencing it instead of saying, we know what's best for them. So yeah, it's talking to the people doing the work, experiencing things at the pointy end of the spear or at the flamey end of the drip torch, and then incorporating and listening and taking the action on what they say. That's the right way to do it. Yeah. And I'll tell you, Brandon, the DOI agencies still do investigations. It's in their policy. The Forest Service literally changed the wording in their policy, and the word investigation is no longer in there. It's coordinated response protocol and learning. And so the DOI agencies, I'm going to be blunt, they have a little catch up to do with that too.
It's kind of weird though, because like you said, you alluded to, there's definitely a culture of fear. There's a culture of reprisal, and it still has not gone away. And right. You've seen it. I've seen it in the 11 short years that I was working in fire. And it's true. Mm-hmm. It's true. But like you said, I think that we need to be listening to the boots on the ground, that GS3 and GS4 level, and somehow trying to get that bumped up the line to where it's actually meaning a difference, probably at the middle level line leadership areas, your FMOs, your AFMOs, because they're the intermediaries between, your GS Fantastic and your boots on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. And, to seek out the people, like you said, in those positions who value that, who value the fresh eyes on something, the GS3, sometimes some of the most amazing things come out of their mouths, right? And if they're reluctant or afraid to speak up, you're not going to get that really awesome nugget from this really fresh set of eyes, right? Looking at something going, why do you do that? and so you have to, as people move up into the organization, into, more of a work leader or then an official supervisor, to remember that and to value that. And we all, when we're moving up into our first, job with responsibility, we're kind of little full of ourselves. I think it's just human nature, and we want to prove that we deserve to be there. And we might be a little bit of cocky, and that's okay. And a lot of people that goes away finally. But, you know, to be able to constantly foster that environment where you do listen and you do value what people have to say. And it's one thing to say, yeah, I want to hear what you had to say and let them say it. But if you never follow through or incorporate or respond to those things, then it dies on the vine, and people stop even offering that up to you and stop speaking up. So it's something that I think you just have to be mindful of to continue to try to cultivate that environment.
Yeah, it's a good thing to do, especially when you're moving up. I had a mentor one time. I said, "Don't you lose your fire," and I'm like, "Okay, cool. Don't lose your fire." That's really cliche and dumb, but then he explained it. We had a couple beers one night and he explained it. It's like, no, there's like never forget where you came from. I bet when you're a last tool, monkey paw, last in the line, you wanted to be heard. You wanted to like, hey, there's this, but you have all these levels of leadership in between you. So you don't want to open your mouth. You don't want to say anything. But when you get to that point where you're actually making decisions, you can't lose that fire. You have to understand the perspective of that rookie or that last tool in the dig, you can't lose that unless it's going to die on the vine, just like you said.
Yeah. You have to remember what that felt like to not have any power. And I remember, just being like when I was, firefighter 2 on a type 2 IA crew and not knowing what the hell was going on. Right. And being really frustrated with that. I had, we all had great crew bosses. We all had not so great. And remembering one of them who just held all the info because it was power. Right.
Yeah. Which is a shitty way of doing business.
Yeah. Right. For no other reason, and didn't share that information. And so I've always also tried to share everything I could. And if I couldn't, at least tell people why I couldn't share it, And so, that's remembering how that felt to feel like you're in the dark and you don't know what's going on and nobody will tell you anything, and remember what that felt like. It didn't feel very good.
No, it's a good lesson to keep when you start moving up the chain, especially if it's someone who was in your position before you retired. I mean, that's pretty up there.
Yeah. I never thought I'd get that far. So that's pretty good.
No one ever does. But yeah, that's another thing too, is like over the years, I mean, 11 short years that I've been was in fire, past tense was, I've seen a lot of changes, and I've seen probably the I guess you could say the ass end of the shut up and dig mentality, the old school mentality, into that like median progressive. I mean, it's still making a lot of changes, but there needs a lot of work to be done still. And especially in the context of women in fire. Mm-hmm. I have the utmost respect for women in fire from strictly a biological point. And that's like my one of my bases. And some of the women I've worked with are most incredible firefighters I've ever worked with. Like I'm going to shout her name out, but Alyssa, who was one of the best rookies, and she knows who she is. She's one of the best rookies I ever could work with it or ever ask for. She was dialed. She was on it. The thing though is that I never really realized is I try and treat everybody as equal, but from a biological standpoint, women have to put in 2, if not 3 times the amount of work to get the same physiological response. And that's strictly because of hormones. So this job, if you women out there are doing this job, I have the utmost respect for you because it is fucking hard.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And, like you said, a lot of it's just sheer biology, right? And when you talk about strength and things like that. And so having to really work hard to show that you earn that place there. Right. And it's, it's tough. And even when I was on the actual hotshots in 96, which doesn't seem like as long ago that it was. Right. And I remember there were 3 women on the crew, and like there was a 19-year-old guy who we overheard talking about, women shouldn't be allowed to fight fire.
You tell him to shut the fuck up? Because I would have told him to shut the fuck up.
Well, and what was cool is the older guys kind of shut him down.
Good.
Because they're like, you haven't even worked with it. You're like so wet behind the ears. You're just out of high school. We have, and there's some badass women, and you don't even know what you're talking about, right? And so that was cool. That was cool to see the guys intervene on the behalf of the women to say, you know, you're full of crap and all that. So, and I think that's what, you know, when I look back over my career, having men go to bat for me, stand up for me, you know, sometimes was what made the difference, right? And you know, to this day, you know, when I've dealt with, you know, I was telling somebody that every single fire I went on when I started going out as a single resource, you know, as I moved up in my calls, every single fire I went on, I had to deal with some kind of bullshit from some idiot guy. And it was often, you know, the guys intervening to shut that down, which was really, first of all, a really cool thing to see because, you know, I'm their sister and they're sticking up for me. And yeah, I mean, it's just astounding. Like I'm even a division soup and I've got a dozer boss hitting on me in my chain of command. It's just like, what are you doing?
Wow, dude, come on. Pump the brakes, bud.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so it's been, you know, it's a challenge and in some ways, I'm pretty frustrated because the number of women in fire are really going down in a pretty steep decline. If you look at official numbers, and I've seen the official numbers from HR, and there are fewer women in fire now than there were 15 years ago. So I had a lot more women role models that I saw in fire assignments and in jobs than the women coming up now see. And that worries me because they're not seeing then these women in these positions or qualifications or out on the fire line to aspire to go, hey man, I can do that. She's badass. Right. So there's the agencies have a lot of work to do with that still ahead of them.
So what do you think is the reasoning behind that decline? Do you think there's any particular reason that stands out to you, or do you think it's just random, or do you think it's just kind of stereotyped as a male dominated industry, which it is a male dominated industry. Let's just call a spade a spade. But do you think there's any reasons?
I think, you know, I some of us talk about this, like trying to put our finger on it because management's trying to figure it out. Right. And I feel like upper management at the regional Washington office level keep focusing on recruitment. And it's not a recruitment issue because people involved in fire hire, temp hire, there are a lot of women applying as temporaries, entry level, first time in, right? And it's what we're seeing then in perm fire hire at the 7, 8, 9 level. That's where we're losing women, right? So it's a retention problem. And I think that for a woman who wants to work in a outdoors, physically challenging, you know, this kind of profession, first of all, I think there are more alternatives for doing that kind of work than there were before, right? There are more opportunities, more other jobs like that. I also think that, you know, the women who even came up before me, the women in the 70s, you know, who were really blazing the trails, first woman hotshot, first woman smoke jumper. You know, I think they also felt this sense of responsibility that I've got to do this for the women behind me. I've got to put up with this crap to make it easier for the next woman. And I think a lot of women now, they're just not willing to do that. They're not willing to put up with the shit. They're just not willing to do it. I can go work for the Nature Conservancy, right? Or I can go work for a private environmental company if I want to work in the outdoors. And I just think a lot of them aren't willing to do it anymore, aren't willing to sacrifice and have to put up with a lot of crap. I also think as more women get into this profession and as they have partners, primarily if it's a male partner, they have professions too. And so they may not be as mobile to escape a crappy situation, right? Because they've got a spouse who has a career in this part of the country that they have to be there for. Whereas when, you know, the early days of the male-dominated profession in the Forest Service, you know, a lot of stay-at-home wives, or they were in more like teaching, nursing, that they could get the job no matter where they went. right? There were more opportunities for these women who were wives to get a job, be able to follow their husband if they still wanted to have that kind of a career. And we don't have that anymore. We have much more diverse. We have, like I said, spouses with careers and jobs, and then you can't just pick up and go if it's a crappy situation. So I think that's another one. I think the struggle for women who want to start families, because, you got to kind of take a break, and some women are able to do it. They have good support. They have family that can help if they go on a fire assignment, as the kids get older, but not everybody has that. And so then a lot of women move into not the operational jobs, right? Because it's family friendly. If I'm a prevention tech, I don't have to go on a fire assignment, right? Yeah. I can do my job. I can stay here, and I don't have to. No one else is depending on me. I'm not on a crew. I'm not on a mod. I'm not on an engine or helitack. I'm just this person doing my prevention job. I can take a break and stay home with my kids, right, for a while, or fuels or dispatch.
About to say dispatch is one of those big ones. I know a lot of women that, they wanted to have kids, and it's hard to raise a kid when you are gone. You can't be a part-time parent. And that's for both men and women, it's equal. But I know a lot of people that work their ass off to get their dispatch quals, and they go to that while the husband goes be a hotshot for 6 months out of the year.
Right. And I think if both people are in fire, they can't both be gone all the time and have a family. And so, then we do fall back into some of those more traditional roles where it's, more the expectation that the wife, the mom, kind of takes that, stays home with the kids, and it just kind of is what it is. And we don't, like, I had a really good friend. We were on the hotshot crew together, and she was in fuels in Idaho, and her husband he was in aviation, and they decided to start a family. And she, took her 6 months off to stay home with raise her son. And then she was ready to go back to work, but she wanted to go back part-time. And there was another woman in a similar situation in fuels, and they came up with a job share. Like, we could do this job full-time, and each of us could work part-time though, and be able to stay home a little bit more with our kids. They worked it out, made this proposal. And Suzanne, she won the fuels person of the year for Region 4. Like, no shit. She's a rock star, man. She was freaking rock star. And the agency wouldn't accommodate her or this other person. They wouldn't even consider it.
They wouldn't even give it the time of day, huh?
Wouldn't even get it the time of day. And like I said, she was a high performer. She was a proven go-getter. She was an awesome employee. And she resigned. They let her go. And it was just astounding. I remember talking to her about it, and we just, and there were some people in the agency who fought for her, like our regional fuels guy tried to talk to her for us, and they just wouldn't budge, just wouldn't do it. And sure, that was, in the early 2000s, but it's just a challenge. And I just think, a lot of women I've talked to are just like, I'm just not, whether it's a family or whether it's putting up with, gender discrimination, biases, whatever, they're just tired, and they're like, it's not worth my mental health anymore. And I just think women are more willing to just walk away and find a different work environment, which is unfortunate, right? I want to talk them all into staying. I'm like, no, please stay. Please. You're awesome. We need more women. But when it comes down to, like they're saying, my mental health is suffering. My family life is suffering. I can't do this anymore. This job is not worth it. You can't argue with that. Right. I'm not going to try and talk them out of that.
No, that's not. If they've already made up their mind, you could see that look on their face too. If they've already made up their mind, it's just not worth trying to convince them because their mind is already made up.
Right.
Yeah. Right. It's just interesting to hear. I mean, what are some other unique challenges that women face in the fire service? Because obviously I can't speak to it because I'm a dude. So I'm naive to the subject. So I know I've seen like some bullshit that's gone down. I've seen some and heard some stories that are just absolute atrocities, Right. But as far as like the nitty gritty stuff, I don't know anything about it because I'm blind to it.
Yeah.
I'm not a woman.
No. And that's really good. And I appreciate someone like you. And I've heard from other men who are like, help us help you. tell us your stories. What do we need to do? And I think, like I tell people, because, I was always kind of a outspoken type A woman. Right. And I remember one time when I was on the hotshot crew, and we were on a fire in Texas, and we're in fire camp, and this guy, look over, and they're assembling the lunches, and this guy, he's a crew boss off another crew, type 2 crew, and he's high grading out of the prepared lunches. He's picking, like, he's looking,
he's rat fucking stuff. He's rat fucking out of the sack lunches.
And I'm sitting there, we're eating breakfast, the crew, and I look over and see this guy, and I just yelled at him, "Hey, what are you doing? Get out of those lunches." And the soup is like, "Duncan." And I thought, oh, shit, I'm busted,
here we go.
Oh, crap, push-ups. Calls me over, and he's like, "Hey, good job calling that asshole out, man."
Yeah.
He's like, "Good on you." So I was kind of, quote unquote, rewarded for, like, kind of taking an initiative, calling somebody out. Right.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a good thing to do. and then I learned, as I went forward into the world, that wasn't always appreciated. And
nope. Depends on who it is.
Yeah. And so I tell people, when I'm trying to talk about this, it's kind of it's for women, it's the damned if we do, damned if we don't. So, if you're more of a type A like I am, and you're more direct and you speak up, then we get labeled as bossy, or, well, she's a bitch, or she's too aggressive, or, she's too loud, she's too harsh. I've had all those things said about me, where I think I'm modeling the desirable leadership traits, right? Yeah. That I've seen from my mentors and the people I looked up to, and that some people appreciated, right? So then that's tough. That's the nitty gritty. And then you've got the opposite, where maybe you have more of a quiet, non-type A woman. And I've seen the women like this, the quiet leader. There are men who are like that too, the quiet leaders. But then I hear them, well, she doesn't exhibit enough leadership. She doesn't have command presence.
Not assertive enough.
This. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then it's like, well, which one do you want? Because the people who do have it, well, they're bitches, but you're saying the ones who don't have it, well, they're not, bitch enough. Is that what you're saying? And so that's,
what do you want from me?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's just, I watch that and I see that. And it's like, well, shit, we can't win, right? We can't win no matter what. And so what do you need us to do? And so I think that there are a lot of really awesome, cool dudes out there who do see the different things that women bring, and they cultivate it and they seek it. Like my hotshot soup had spent his entire career in Region 5 on hotshot crews and engines, and then started up the Asheville hotshots, in Region 8. And he was like, I love having women on the crew. He's like, I freaking hate the testosterone poisoning
the bro fest.
With crew with 20 dudes. And they're, and so we know they're out there, and that's really awesome. But I just see it to this day, like on just before I retired, my forest, and people putting women into the box of you're either this or you're that, and neither one of them are acceptable. And it's, that if you hear this buzzword, unconscious bias, and it's a real thing. It really is a real thing. And I think some people don't even realize they're doing it. And I think that's the harder thing to overcome, is when people aren't doing it out of a malicious thing. They're not trying to be an asshole. They're not, they don't think they're doing anything wrong. That's the harder stuff to overcome and break. And then none of this stuff is easy. Like, I'm not saying that this stuff is easy and should be able to do that and change it. It's hard work. It's hard. I have my own unconscious biases, right? I've had to check myself, and
everybody does.
I remember not liking girly girls in fire, right? Because I didn't think that they were showing that they were serious enough about it, and it was giving us all a bad name. And I had to overcome that. Right? That my bias against more girly girls. So,
Yeah, I wonder if it's also a point of naivety. Like I was saying, I wonder if that's kind of expanded across, if you're to multiply that naivety as far as not knowing how to approach it, or it's kind of rare. Sometimes it's rare in certain regions to see a woman in fire.
Yeah.
Some regions it is. It just is. So how do we open up that discussion? I mean, do you think it's like a group naivety of like we don't know how to communicate properly, or we don't know what to expect or anything like that? I mean, I might be getting off in the weeds here, but do you think it might be something along the lines of that as well?
Yeah, no, I think you're onto something, Brandon, with that. And I think it's just it's just because we're raised that way in the agency, right? And I think it's like getting into that naivety, don't even know we're doing it, right? And people have to be willing to speak up and ask to have that conversation. And some people are willing to do it. And I've had people reach out to me like, well, I don't know if you remember when Travis Dotson with the Wildland Lessons Learned Center wrote that essay about how he started to see things differently through the lens of being a dad to a 3-year-old little girl. Right. And he wrote this essay about, man, I was a dick, right? Man, I did some shitty stuff to women. And now I've got this 3-year-old girl who's telling me she wants to be a firefighter, like, Daddy? And he's going, no. So he wrote this awesome, really heartfelt, vulnerable, laid himself bare about it. And he got attacked. He got trashed.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he got dragged through the mud. Like some of his buddies said he was betraying the men and all this stuff, and he was shocked. He didn't see this coming. He didn't see this backlash coming.
Oh, but they were afraid that he was betraying the men. Why don't you check your fragile little fucking ego, man? Are you serious?
Right. And
that you have to be really insecure to think like
totally.
That. Yeah. Anyways, sorry. No,
but he had the group going to bat for him. Right? People going, right on, brother. I've done it too. And I've been a part of the problem. For a guy to stand up and say, I've been part of the problem. I was that guy. I was a jerk, man, to these women. And whatever made them make that shift, I don't care what it was. I'm glad it's happened, and so that also brought out those kinds of conversations. And I think it just takes, again, people who are willing to have those tough conversations, whether you're a hotshot soup or a district ranger, right? I remember trying to hire, because, I'm in Region 8. I was like I said, I was in North Carolina, and Region 8, very few women in fire operations. And it's probably the toughest region I've worked in. I worked there twice to be a woman in, for me. And I remember I was trying to hire this gal into an engine position, and she was from Idaho. And she had done some details in Region 8. She'd come down PFTC, done a lot of burning, and she was just great. I mean, her resume and her interview and all this. And a woman ranger who I respected the hell out of didn't pick her, even though she was by far and above the most qualified, fire quals, all of it, didn't pick her, and said, well, I don't think she's a good fit. And I said, what do you mean by that? Well, it's these pretty conservative guys that she'd have to be working with. And
oh, God.
Yeah. And I remember standing in the parking lot having this conversation with her. And I was just like, do you hear what you're saying? Like, can you hear yourself, what you're saying? And she was, she got pissed because I was calling her out on it. And so it's not just men, it's not only, all men doing this, and I was just like, listen to what you're saying. Listen to yourself, please. You have this bias, and literally I was the National Forest in North Carolina. Therefore, National Forest managed by one SO. We had 8 ranger districts. We had one of the largest fire programs. We had 11 engines, hotshot crew, helicopter, dozers, tractor plows. We didn't have any. I was the only woman, permanent woman in fire operations. We had women in dispatch and a incident business specialist. That was it.
That's it.
That was it.
Sounds diverse.
Right, in 2016. And I'm trying to hire a GS6 woman on an engine, and she's not a good fit, so yeah.
God, man.
Yeah. So yeah, we got to, like I said, we got to get past that naivety and the whatever is telling us that this person isn't a good fit. That's been used against people who are minorities, right? That's been used against, African Americans or Asians or whatever. You hear that all the time. And I started to push back on that in my last job. And I would say, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear that they're not a good fit. I don't trust that, what you're telling me with that anymore. I need to hear specifically why you don't want to hire them. Right. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's weird though. I wonder if it's like a generational thing too, because I mean, I was raised by, very traditional parents, both my parents worked, but they had it in their mind that, dad goes and works and mom should be taking care of the kids.
Right.
Do you think it might be one of those things that just is one of those things that needs to slowly die as a generational aspect?
Yeah, I do think there's something to be said for that, for certain. It's just like you said, it's kind of the cultural norm still. And, I think that's part of it. And that's like, again, these things aren't easy. This making these shift, say it's like turning the Titanic, right? It's like turning a cruise ship. It's not easy and it's not going to happen quickly. But when, we're seeing, instead of progress, we're seeing, regress, it should be getting people's attention. And I don't feel like it's getting enough people's attention to really say what's going on here and what do we need to do differently, Yeah.
The whole dynamic is changing, and not only just for women in fire issues, but just the Forest Service or the agencies, all the agencies together as a whole. And I think people are becoming more empowered and more vocalized about these efforts of changing things. So I want to see that continue to increase, and these older, I guess, idealisms that just go downhill, like these old mentalities just slowly die because they need to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think a really good example of that in just general society is like the LGBTQ community. Mm-hmm. I have nephews, who are like late teens, early 20s, and they have outwardly open, gay friends. They don't even think twice about it. Yeah. It's not even a thing, right?
Oh, why does it matter?
So that's right. Doesn't matter. Yeah. They don't care. And I think that's a really good illustration of the generations coming up that, kind of busting through that stuff. They don't really give a crap, right? We're seeing, even in the agency, we see more, LGBTQ who are out and open with it, right? Mm-hmm. Because we all knew people who were kind of on the DL in the early days, and it was risky, and they couldn't take, it was putting themselves at personal risk to be able to speak up. Now you see people who are married, right? And so that's a really good shift that gives me hope, that we can get past some of that stuff. And yeah, so yeah, you're right. I think I have, like I mentioned earlier, I always get frustrated, the old farts. Well, the youngsters had it so much easier than we did. Oh my God, we listen and they have it so easy and they don't know hardship and oh my God, the millennials. And I've never been that way. Like, I have so much respect for these younger generations coming up, and they give me hope. They're so smart and they're so outspoken and they're so open and they're creative and they're making these changes. And so, I think they're gonna be the ones to, like I said, make the good changes that we can all be proud of. And so I have a lot of hope for the next generations coming up. I think we're in really good hands with that. It's breaking down, like you said, the old guard and the old norms and the old, attitudes that I think we have to do. And maybe as people just generally migrate towards retirement, and we have the cycle, maybe that's what's going to get us there.
It might. I mean, it's not really like setting those old mentalities out to pasture per se, but I think it's more or less of building upon the foundation that they laid, because that's what every generation does. The generation, they either fix the fuck ups of the generation that preceded them, or they build upon it, or something. Usually a lot of times it's both. So to say that millennials or Zennials or whoever is without hardship, it's really intellectually dishonest, because we have to pick up the pieces and build upon what our previous generation laid before us. Right.
And every generation cacked on the one, below them. And we all did fine. Right. So
we're good ish.
Yeah. Good ish.
There's some stuff in the media right now that I don't want to get into, but hey, that's, hopefully it'll all pan out. But no, there's good change on the horizon. I think one of those things that you're involved with too is, and myself involved with, is the grassroots organization. I think they're kind of become this powerhouse of advocacy, which is cool. So you're involved with them, and now explain your role.
Yeah, so I was kind of late to the party with that, but glad I finally got there and started seeing, the on social media from the grassroots groups, and was like, wow, this is cool. Want to be a part of this, reaching out and talking to some of the folks who really putting the work and effort into that. And so I definitely support what the grassroots group is trying to do about the whole forestry technician and mental health and things like that. And so started interacting, getting on some emails, getting on some socials that you've been a part of, and social media. And then I wrote a couple of essays about it. I was one of the recipients of an American Wildfire Experience microgrant. Mm-hmm. And so I set up a blog, and my initial intent was to just write from the perspective of, like a fire staff officer, FMO, chief, about what it's like to be in our shoes. Right. And then I did start out doing that, but then I was also able to incorporate some of, what this group is trying to do that I support and how I see it, to provide some more information to reinforce the necessary changes that we think need to happen, that we're asking to happen, that we're asking the agencies to do. And I was pretty fortunate because, I knew I was at the end of my career. And like when we were talking earlier about fear of reprisal and fear of speaking up, and how that's a real thing. And some of the folks involved in that certainly have that fear. They're earlier in their careers. They're at lower GS levels. They're right to have that discomfort and fear. But I'm at the end of my career. I can be the person that can say a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And hopefully also being at my level, I have a little bit of credibility with that. And so, ways that I could help daylight and get that information out there, get support from the non-fire community, right? And so that was kind of just a way that I could do that, a way that I could, bring some attention to that, share the information, share some, like I said, some facts, some data, some information. And so it's really cool to be involved in that and to stay involved in that after retirement. And I hope I'm able to continue to contribute and like I said, have a positive effect on that.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit more in depth about that after we stop rolling, because of, there's some confidentiality things that we got to have on there, because there's, like you said, there's a serious fear of reprisal. And I do know that there is, active duty people in that group. And they're just like, it's kind of cool because it's like a guerrilla warfare kind of tactic.
Yeah.
And I'm just so happy to see the amount of success that it has taken off with, because nobody on the board of directors, nobody anticipated that, and to see it take off like that, it's really satisfying. So, but and
to see elected officials becoming interested and kind of taking up the cause, right? And I think we're getting some traction. But I will tell you this: you don't know this. But I actually had an ethics violation filed against me for my blog.
I know. I heard about that.
Yeah. And, I did my research to make sure I didn't get into hot water with ethics. There's actually a Office of Ethics, USDA. Every agency has an Office of Ethics, right? Yep. There's the overall federal, then there's the USDA Office of Ethics. So I had done my research because I didn't want to, get crossways when I set everything up. And so thought I was in a good place for that, thought I had done my due diligence. And of course, I knew I was going to ruffle feathers. That's the point, right? That was part of the point. Yeah. I'm trying to get people's attention. And so then I found out in a roundabout way, I didn't even find out internally about it. And that I was reported for an ethics violation. And someone was going around saying that it had been determined that I had violated the ethics, and only the Office of Ethics can make that determination. And like I said, I'm finding this out third hand from somebody outside the agency. So I emailed the Office of Ethics, and the guy's like, yeah, we're totally familiar with your case. We've read your blog. And he said, I'll attach to my email is what we sent to management who complained. And he said, you didn't violate any ethics except technically, right. Except technically, he said, because you don't have on your blog where you work, you don't have your title, when you wrote your forestry technician, you put a disclaimer in there. That's all good. You're on the up and up. But he said, technically accepting the micro grant could be seen as accepting money to then talk about your job. And he said, basically, we just told management that our advice was to tell you to give the money back and you're good. You're all good. He said, that's the point, is we have to be able to inform the employee what they need to do, then set things right. Well, management never told me, never came to me and said, you should do this. And I told the guy from Office of the Ethics, and he was furious. He was like, are you kidding me? And I said, no. I said, I heard about it from someone outside the agency, and now you just validated that I didn't have this. And I said, and they're saying that I had these. And he's like, no. And he's like, well, that makes me angry. He said, because again, the idea is to inform the employee. And he said, also, I have a group of employees myself who do this work. This is what we do. And they spend time on it. And he said, so it's a waste of our time if they're not even going to act on it and tell the employee and make things right and all that. So that was pretty frustrating to hear that. But again, I wasn't really as worried about reprisal, but I was disappointed to hear that things were being said about me that weren't true about violating ethics, because again, I really wanted to make sure I didn't do that. So it's a real deal.
Yeah. I mean, ethics violations are a serious thing. I mean, some of those ethics violations could come with jail time.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty serious stuff. And so, and if you're, I didn't want my message to get lost in a controversy because I violated ethics. And that's why I really took steps and pains to do my research and make sure I wasn't, so a GS6 guy on the grassroots group, hell yeah, be anonymous, dude, because I don't want anything bad to happen to you. You still have a huge career ahead of you. You still have a long ways to go. And so I don't blame folks one bit for being worried and wanting to stay anonymous and work behind the scenes, though, to make these changes that you and I know and others know are really important and need to happen.
Yeah, I just want to continue to see it grow, and I just want to protect everybody. Even being on this podcast is, it could be a potential for hot water because I can't protect you. It's like one of those things. It's like you know damn well when you come on this show, if you're on the show, well, don't say anything stupid. Don't put your ass in a crack. And I explicitly say that. You saw the in brief that I give out. It's pretty extensive of what not to say. And it's just one of those things. I don't want to see anybody lose their job over, something in passing or, saying the wrong thing.
And even like you said, even if you have somebody on here who technically doesn't violate anything by what they say, but they piss someone off.
Oh yeah. Right? There's that reprisal.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I don't want to see that happen to people either. And, I ended up giving Bethany Hannah the money back from the AW microgrant
so rad.
Because I wanted to be on the up and up. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm also a GS-13 and I could afford to give her the $500 back. Whereas someone else who maybe won the micro grant and they wanted to buy a really nice camera or a lens for their camera, right?
Yeah.
And this was the way for them to do it. So yeah, I was like, I'm all about being on the up and up here, and so but yeah, it's a real deal, and I don't want to see anybody get in trouble or like suffer consequences because of it.
Yeah, it's the unfortunate consequence of working for Uncle Sam, or if you, like you said, if you piss somebody off, that's even worse. It's arguably even worse. But speaking about your blog, you had 2 excellent articles that really stand out to me. You have People on the Edge of the Night, and then you have We Don't Need Another Forestry Technician, parts 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those.
Yeah, and so We Don't Need Another Forestry Technician hero.
That's what it was.
So, yeah, take on the old, Tina Turner song. I think it was from Mad Max.
I love that movie.
And
movies, plural.
Yeah. And so, so I just had been kind of rolling around how I could talk about, I wanted to try and incorporate, kind of the trap of heroism, right? Because I think there's just too much of that, hero worship. And so I kind of wanted to talk about that. I certainly wanted to address the problems and issues with being a forestry technician. I was trying to roll everything into one and I just couldn't make it happen. So that's why I did a part 1 and a part 2. And part 1 was more of kind of setting the stage and more talking about, facing fatalities and when bad things happen and try to highlight, the risks, not just physical safety, but personal, mental, family, all those risks about the job that we do, and I don't want someone to become a hero because they die. Right.
Yeah.
And then part 2 was diving deeper into the actual information about the whole forestry technician series and what that means or doesn't mean and how the agency has been struggling with that. And, so I linked to actual letters and memos from past chiefs of the Forest Service and IFPM to kind of paint the picture for not just people within the agencies, the federal fire agencies, but the people we're trying to get to support our efforts, right? And so to just highlight that, again, we're forestry technicians until we die. And then all of a sudden we're wildland firefighters, right?
I was waiting for you to say it, but there's that old adage. We're not firefighters until we die in the line of duty. And that's the sad part.
Yeah. And I even put in there, when we were dealing with all the COVID stuff this year and, when the questions are starting to be asked about if someone contracted it, how are we going to prove it so that it's OWCP? If someone's, because we're finding out that there are some people that are still having debilitating effects months after they have COVID. And so the importance of being able to, fill out a CA1 or CA2 and is OWCP going to support that you contracted it in the line of duty, right? On a fire assignment or at fire, whatever. And the agency, Department of Labor, who's over OWCP, actually asked the Forest Service, do you want to identify them as first responders? Because if you identify them as first responders, it's going to make it a lot easier for us to say yes, that this was a work illness. And the Forest Service, they're handing them this on a platter to me.
Yeah.
A rare moment of Department of Labor and OWCP actually doing something positive. And
it's never happened in the history of any agency.
Never happens. But here they do it, right? Yeah. And the Forest Service says, no, we're not going to do that. We know they're not calling us wildland fire. They wouldn't even categorize us as first responders so that OWCP could maybe say, yeah, you got it at work. I was just freaking furious over that. A simple thing to do to err on the side of the employees who don't understand, and everybody's, early days of COVID, a simple thing to do that you would not do on behalf of these people who are going to be out there doing this work, putting themselves not only at the regular risk, but now at risk of COVID.
That's a goddamn travesty, if you ask me.
It's shameful. It's fucking shameful. And I put that in, in my essay.
It is fucking shameful. It's like, seriously? Yeah. They've been fighting this term tooth and fucking nail for decades. Literal decades. And they don't want to do a fucking thing to like make it a little bit better. And we have this whole argument about millennials getting shit on, right? All the time, right? How the hell are you supposed to pay for anything, especially if you live in a high cost of living area like Southern California? How the fuck are you supposed to pay your mortgage on a GS6 wage?
Right.
Even with your COLA.
Yeah. And when a state passes a new minimum wage, and the state minimum wage is higher than a federal wage, GSC, something's wrong here, people. What are we doing to people? And I'm just, it's just, like I said, it's a travesty with how we're treating people. And, and so I just tried to highlight that. And, the last time the Forest Service even talked about it was 2009. And that's where the 301 series came from. It was a placeholder. And it said right in the memo, this is only temporary. We are going to work with OPM. We will establish a unique wildland fire series. We will. Because OPM called bullshit on the 401. OGC OIG, Office Inspector General, did an audit called bullshit on the 401 and said, you can't do this anymore.
So here we are 12 years later in the same fucking boat.
Here we are. And so there's, we've caught some people's attention. And it sounds like they're going to assemble a team and have a good cross section and have actual boots on the ground representations on this working team. There's desire at ASC and HR to pursue this. And so it sounds like it was kind of one of the last things happening before I retired, to assemble this working team to pick this issue back up. Right. And I hope so, man. I'm skeptical. I'm cynical. I feel because we've seen it die on the vine. We've seen the things kind of go and then fizzle out. And, we don't even have a national fire director in the Forest Service right now. So depending on who that is that going to change? Is that going to be a priority? Is it not going to be a priority? And so there's a lot of unknowns. And so I'm cautiously optimistic that, the time is ripe and enough people are speaking out and other people are going to call in like, yeah, why? And so like I said, I'm really hopeful that this small working group they're trying to put together will get some teeth and get some traction and start working towards making things better and the way they should be, and treating our employees like they matter, like they're not dispensable.
Well, Luke has a good term. He has a good analogy for it. It's like in the old days of mining or logging, right? You always pay the employees of your logging or mining camp at the bar on a Friday night. That way they all spend it at the bar and then they have to go to work on Monday. But mark my words, there will be a time where I see the writing on the wall. People are fucking pissed. There's a timeline on there is a short fuse on this whole organization. And I think that if they don't change something drastically very soon, this whole fucking thing is going to collapse in on itself. You're not going to be able to hire anybody. Like you were saying, state minimum wage. Well, guess what? You work for the feds. You don't have to abide by a state minimum wage. Period. Right. There's no mental health programs. There's no, shit. OWCP is a fucking nightmare.
Oh, a joke.
It's a joke. It's a goddamn joke. And all these things. You can't buy back your seasonal time. You can't do anything.
Yeah. And, I got a little tired of the finger pointing. It was like Forest Service, we're blaming OPM. It's them. They don't want to do this. And, and then they're blaming them. And, and it's like, stop. Can we just get people to work together to figure this out and, move forward into doing right by people? I mean, look at all the people quitting, like people like you, people like Luke, Hump. And if you live in a place like California that you have other opportunities.
Good opportunities too.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good ones to go work for people. Look how many people are going to PG&E, right?
Shit, sign me up, man. I can go make more and do less. Fuck, sign me up.
Yeah. Make more and have a quality of life, have a true work-life balance that's not lip service and bullshit. Go to your coach your kid's soccer team, help raise your children with your spouse, be there for anniversaries and birthdays, and not be exposed to trauma. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And
could you imagine how much the divorce rate would go down and the alcoholism if everybody, I mean, I know it's a pipe dream and it's never going to happen like this. We're not going to be Cal Fire. It's never going to happen. That will never happen as far as like a federal agency goes. We're not going to get treated like that. But could you imagine how much like systemic problems would be fixed as long as we were treated as firefighters? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And valued for that and understanding, like I said, all the sacrifices that folks make in their personal lives, not just the sacrifices you make or the risks you take from a snag or a vehicle accident or whatever, but then all the personal sacrifices people make. And and how many people then would remember, because I know you worked for the BLM and the Forest Service, but a few years ago when they did the federal employee survey and the Forest Service was like third to the last out of 250 agencies, right? And so Forest Service like, we want to be an agency of choice, and we're going to improve things. And it's like, well, here you go. Here's one way to do it.
TikTok.
Big talk. And so, and so it's just I don't understand how people can't connect the dots that if you do this, you're going to have also a more productive, high functioning, workforce. I mean, you see that in private industry, right? Mm-hmm. So this isn't fake. This isn't phony stuff. There's real data that shows you treat your employees right, you value them, you pay them what they're worth, you recognize them, you provide them services. They're going to be great employees, right? It's a win-win.
Oh yeah. No, it is. And well, luckily the dynamic is changing, thankfully. And we also have a little bit ass behind the movement as well. Not only with these working groups, which I know of several of them. It's not just the one up in the Pacific Northwest. There's several of these popping up all over the place, every region, as far as I know. But we also have true grassroots organizations like Grassroots Wildland Firefighters and people like you talking about it openly on your blog. This discussion needs to be had, and it's not an easy discussion to be had, but it needs to happen, and something needs to change before, like I said, it's going to implode if we don't change it.
Yeah. And what gave me some hope is after I published those essays, I actually had line officers. I had a few rangers and forest supervisors reach out to me. And they were like, man, thanks for doing that. Right on. You're exactly right. And in the federal agencies, I had to learn this up and coming, and a line officer, a district ranger, forest supervisor, district manager, refuge manager, park service superintendent. They are the deciders. Yeah. They have the authority to make change. So when those are the people going, you're right on, man, you called it out and we need to hear it. That gave me hope that they get it. They understand it. Though there's still some people in those positions, we can bag on the agents administrators. We can bag on the GS Fantastics, but there are good ones out there who get it. And so they're the ones that, because they can bring the heat, they're the deciders, but they've got to step up now, right? They got to be the ones to help facilitate getting this movement and getting this through, because it's going to cost money, right? Yep.
Once you start talking money too, then everybody tunes out. Right.
There's going to be sour grapes from the non-fire side of the house, and so there have to be people that have the will to support it and help it and make it happen and work through it. Right. They're out there, but they got to then, like I said, they got to stand up and talk.
Yeah, there is that. I mean, also, we got to realize that there might be some unintentional consequences associated with a big change like that. And I don't know what could happen, but some of those things we might not like. It's a very real fact. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's, people got to also be realistic then and look at what the trade-offs are then.
Yeah. Do cost benefit analysis and see what actually makes sense. We just got to do right. What does right look like? People have been saying it for years, but nothing has ever, I don't even think the discussion's really been had on a serious manner.
No, I don't even think it's been on anybody's radar until the grassroots kind of was like, hey, time to talk about this again.
Yeah. Well, we're a little bit aggressive as far as throwing things in people's faces, politely correcting agencies of what our actual title is when they want the glory of saying firefighter for likes. But in reality, you misspelled forestry technician. I know a lot of people that do that. I'm one of them.
Yeah. Well, I even started adopting it into my just normal, how I talked at work. And I stopped referring to the fire folks, on the engines, the hotshot crew in my forest. And I stopped referring to them as firefighters just in conversation at the FLT. I started calling them forestry technicians.
It's petty, but it's effective.
Yeah,
I do the same shit. I do the same shit. Oh, man. But yeah, so you've been through a lot of stuff. You've seen a lot of things. And one of those things that were a topic on our list was surviving critical incidents. So this is always one that's fascinated me. I'm actually trying to start a nonprofit in kind of the mental health realm. And I'm obviously biting off way more than I can chew right now. So
yeah.
So if anybody's out there listening that can help me, more than ears. But other than that, so let's talk about some of the incidents you've experienced in your career.
Mm-hmm. Well, I talked about, the escape prescribed fire, and I think a lot of people don't understand how traumatic that can be, right? Oh, yeah. And we had people in our, the non-fire people, like, you guys are a bunch of fucking idiots. I hate it.
What is this, amateur hour? Yeah.
Yeah. Because
it's easy to armchair quarterback stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But, the communities were so pissed off at us that they wouldn't even, we'd go take the G ride to get gas and they wouldn't sell us gas.
Oh, shit.
Oh, yeah. Wouldn't serve us. Go into a restaurant. Nope, we're not serving you. And it wasn't just, they just saw the Forest Service shield on the truck or the uniform. They wouldn't serve anybody. So the non-fire people are like, this is bullshit. And that was pretty bad. And I know, we did a staff ride when I was on the Klamath of the Loudon Ranch fire. That was a BLM prescribed fire that burned down 300 and some homes. Right.
Oh, shit.
And I remember talking to some of the folks who were there on that and how, they, that really screwed them up. And, one guy was like, I still think about it every day, what I could have done differently. Right. So anyway, so if that would have been the worst thing to ever happen to me in my career, at the time I thought it was horrible, but then, I moved on. And when I went to the Klamath, in the space of just 3+ years I was there, we had a helicopter crash, my first week there.
Oh, wow.
On one of our fires that it was a sky crane, 2 pilots, and they crashed into the river and drowned. And then over that winter, we had a non-line of duty death. One of our apprentices crashed into the river. There's a theme because the roads on the Klamath are gnarly.
Yeah.
And and then we had another helicopter crash the following year, and the pilot was actually over. It was on one of our big fires, but one of our crews was under the helicopter doing a long line, and he got the long line hung up in a tree and had to peel off, and so he didn't crash on top of the crew. Basically, killed himself. Not killing them, and then we had another non-line of duty death with one of our fire guys on his way home from work. And then the following year, we had a burnover fatality. So yeah, there was a lot packed in there.
God damn, that's a lot of trauma to experience in such a short time. God.
we were like, the dark humor that we all use to cope with things like that, where we were talking about having an exorcism of the Klamath National Forest, calling somebody in or asking a shaman or something. We need some help here. And it was one thing after another. And those were the early days of, that was before I was, peer support had kind of gotten off the ground, and we were still trying to help people and provide CISM, and it was still a struggle. And we'd learned a lot from South Canyon, right? We learned not to have a guy in a suit show up who didn't know what the hell he was talking about. So we were trying to do better, but I just remember trying to do that and feeling super fucking helpless, and knowing it wasn't enough, but not knowing what else to do. And and we had we had a chaplain with the Siskiyou County Sheriff's Department who was trained in critical incident stress. The nicest man in the world, Keith, still remember his name. He was it. He was willing to help us. And he was one guy who then would come and sit down, and he was great, and people responded really well to him. But it just wasn't enough, and then it really was kind of watching just the human wreckage of people struggling. I had my own struggles, and just like, man, we got to do better with this. And then for me, what I saw the real shift was when the Klamath hotshots had a rollover coming back from a fire, I think on the Plumas, and a driver of a semi fell asleep at the wheel and crossed the center line and clipped the hotshot. The guy the squatty driving the buggy saw the truck coming into his lane, tried to evade, clipped mirrors, but it was enough force, spun the buggy around, and when it hit the dirt, it rolled. Mm-hmm. And the other buggy, they all thought everybody was dead inside. It was really bad. And so that's when we were first exposed to peer support, so like Kurt LaRue, old grizzle hotshot soup from BLM, calls the soup of Klamath, Johnny Klamath, says, "Hey man, I'm going to come out and be peer support for you." And Johnny's like, "What?"
He's like surprised.
Yeah. Because it was another grassroots organization. It was started in the Great Basin, and it was these people who had been through these traumatic events and endured shitty CISM that were like, we can do better with this. We know we can do better. And it was just, again, a wonderful, beautiful thing that started from the people. And so Bert LaRue shows up, some other folks is like, I'm bringing people who do the job and understand. And we're bringing a really dialed in clinician with us. And that's where I also then saw, man, this is cool. Right.
It's effective.
And seeing how
it's effective.
Yeah. Super effective. How, people responded to it, and we didn't have the Walking Dead look and, people still struggling, processing and dealing with this trauma and it, fucking them all up and all that. And so that's another one of those changes you asked me earlier, where I've seen a positive change where we've done that and learned a lot from it. And, we still have some bumps and breaks, but that's a big thing. That's, peer support and people having positive experiences from it. Because one thing I've learned from those clinicians is, you can catch, if you can provide that, it really, studies show in that community of people who study trauma, that it significantly reduces the likelihood that someone will then have PTSD down the road. Right. I mean, there's research, there's data. And so, kind of learned the hard way on some of that stuff and had some of my own struggles with it. But I think the more we can show that it's okay to ask for that kind of help, and it's okay to say that, and we're seeing more people say, can we have this? That's showing that it's working and that it's an effective tool. And helping, in that we talk about the mental health stuff because we don't have a lot of other things provided for us.
Yeah, and that whole mental health thing, it's really hard because we're kind of a xenophobic society as far as the firefighter culture. We don't like outsiders. So when you got some dickhead in a suit and a tie who's captain clinician we're not going to open up to them. We need someone who speaks their language. And I spoke with Minda O's about this a lot extensively.
Yeah.
And Nelda St. Clair. And it's like, yeah, we need clinicians that speak the language of firefighters. That's critical. And that effective CISM debrief rather, that effective CISM debrief after a stressful incident. It's like you said, it does wonders as far as reducing that chance of developing PTSD down the road.
Yeah, it makes all the difference. And you only have one shot to get it right.
Yep.
And so you got to bring the heat, you got to bring the A game. And Minda's one of those freaking, man, I've been out with her on it, and it's a thing of beauty to watch her do it. I mean, it's just amazing.
She's a machine.
Oh my God, she's so awesome. And and so but there's it's crazy. There are even people resistant within the agencies to that. I don't get it.
That's a tough guy mentality. That's one of those mentalities that needs to die.
You're right. Exactly.
You're not
exactly.
invincible.
And I think there are enough people, like you said, who seeing the positive effects that are going to, who keep it going and keep it in. And, and like I became a peer supporter because I saw the value. I saw that it worked. And that's usually where we get really good peer supporters. Then they have a positive experience. I want to give back. I want to help, help someone else who went through what I did. And again, it's this, kind of a grassroots level type thing that is effective. And you want someone that you trust to come in. If you're going to talk about your darkest day and how afraid you were or a horrible thing that you saw, and you're going to open yourself up to that vulnerability, you're only going to do that if you have 100% trust in those people that you're talking to.
Oh, absolutely. And that program has certainly changed over the years. Like my first CISM that I ever went through, it was dog shit. It was horrible. But now after seeing, as an observer, seeing it from the outside, like the second one I went through was even better than the first. And now the ones that I have observed, they're great. They're really effective. And there's a gentleman over here who works locally. His name is Assad. And I believe you guys are friends, actually. You and Assad are friends, good buddies. And just the way these folks work, it's amazing. And that's kind of one regret I have about my fire career is not being able to get into that CISM, becoming a peer supporter. It's one thing I've always wanted to do, but never got the opportunity to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And, it's the people who are really committed to it. And, when we're recruiting people and they go through the training, we're still running into people who have the passion and want to do it, yet their supervisor doesn't let them. And we still run into that where, for whatever reason. Right. But we also, it's not just a fire thing, right? Like we did when we had one on my forest, maybe a year and a half ago. And it was a 20-year-old rec tech who doing his job, and a guy had drowned. And he's the guy in the uniform that then everybody's like, oh, you got to help us. He's 20-year-old rec tech 1039, and he's got to go, this guy's been dead all night in the water and he's got to go fill for pulse and do all this stuff. And so we were able to get him CISM, right? We've had some other, suicide, non-fire person, right? Bring that CISM into. And so we really try to also show this isn't just a fire thing. Maybe we have the more traumatic events. We have more of this stuff, and most of us who do it are fire, but this isn't just for fire. This is for all the employees who are having a really hard day and a bad day, and we're here to help. And we got a lot of militia folks who then also, they're not on a fire assignment in July. They're a wildlife biologist or in timber or whatever. And I can go help. And so, so it's even grown beyond that, which is just super cool.
And that's the way to do it too, is extend it to the extended family of fire too,
right.
If you were to do that to rec techs or the biologist or GIS or whoever, that's huge. That's one of those tides. When it raises all ships, right? Yeah, that's one of those things that's critical because, like you said, it's not just fire.
Yeah, we had a helicopter crash on the Mount Hood this year, and the manager was militia. He was a timber guy, and he was off my forest. And the trainee was a hydrologist, the trainee manager, right? And it was the first time they had experienced SISM. They weren't familiar with it, didn't really know that it was out there, that it was this thing. And, they benefited from it and got good feedback from both of them saying, wow, I didn't even know that was a thing, but that was awesome. And we're bringing it, try to bring it to everybody. Why would we not help, like you said, the extended family of the agencies?
Oh, absolutely. It's just good to see those things change over, time. I mean, I was in it for a very short time, but with someone like you in your shoes with a lot of wisdom and experience in the field, I mean, what are some of those reflections on your career? I mean, what would you have done differently? I mean, let's go into that. If you're to start it all over again, let's do it.
Yeah. It's funny because, you hear a lot of people say, I have no regrets. I have a lot of regrets. It's like where I was a jerk, or didn't treat somebody nice, where I, was an asshole or whatever, didn't stand up for somebody or wasn't a good supervisor. But certainly I do those things differently, right? I'd just be a better human being, I think. But for me, because I started out as a trainee forester, and then wanted to go into fire. And certainly that took some effort, right, to get into fire full time. But I loved, Asheville hotshots are one of the 3 developmental hotshot crews, right? Yeah. So you just detailed for a season. But man, I loved it. I loved being on a Type 2 IA crew. I absolutely loved being on a hotshot crew. And I think I would have liked to have had more of a career as in that kind of environment. When I went through the Asheville Hotshots, I was at GS9.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Just right? Raking it in.
Yeah, exactly.
When I was on Redmond, I think we had a GS9 as well. When I was on Redmond. Right. So there's only 3. There's Asheville, Reading, and Redmond, right? And I think they're a very underrated and underutilized program. They're freaking awesome. They're super fun. Super
fun. And so, and I remember talking to the soup after the season was over, and I was like, man, I want to do this, and I'm going to look for jobs, and I'm going to downgrade because I was a 460. I was professional. Mm-hmm. I'm going to downgrade and I'm going to take a forestry technician job. I was like into it.
You caught the bug.
He talked me out of it. And, he was like probably he was in his maybe 50 then, and he'd had like I said, a career as a hotshot and engines. And he was like, why in the hell would you give up what you have right now? He's like, you went to college, you have a degree, why would you don't give up your GS9. He's like, you can find a path into fire, but don't give up your GS9. He was like, don't do it.
Just hard and fast. No, don't do this.
Yeah. And sometimes I still think I would have liked to have done that. But I also have to think about, I do like the path my career took, right? I like that I worked in a lot of different regions. I really liked working in fuels because I believe in prescribed fire. I believe we need more good fire on the landscape, and I don't know that I would have had that. I don't know if I would have spent a good amount of my career in the hotshot world if I would have ever gotten to be, to the level I got to be, where I can, have some influence at my level, and I can make some changes, and I can, hire who I want, or, you know what I mean? And so it's kind of a mixed bag, certainly would have done some things differently, but pretty happy with the way my career turned out.
Oh, that's good. I mean, you've seen the highs and lows just like everybody else, but I mean,
yeah.
What were some of the highs? Like, what were the best things?
Oh, that's a great question. I got to go on 2 international assignments.
Lucky.
Yeah, super lucky. And it was right place, right time. So when I was working in Florida, I got to go to Belize and do a prescribed fire workshop with a bunch of people from the Nature Conservancy. So that was super cool. And then in 2012, I got to go to Ethiopia. Also, we did some prescribed fire workshop and actually went out and did some prescribed burning in Ethiopia. That was super rad.
That's rad.
Yeah, it was awesome. So those were cool. I really like after going through a lot of those, critical incidents, fatalities when I was on the Klamath. I then took that class, You Will Not Stand Alone, that Region 5 started. That was another grassroots. It was the people off the San Bernardino after they endured the Esperanza fire and losing the entire engine crew. They were like, there was no policy back then for that stuff. You were navigating and kind of inventing it as you went along. And those folks who were GS7s, GS8s, GS9s were like, hey, we can tell people what we learned so they don't have to start over. We can, and they built this class that was really just Region 5 at first. And then other regions started hearing about, hey, I'm hearing about this one again. And that's what I did. I'd moved back to Region 8, but then I'm popping into my Region 5 peeps going, I want in this class. And then was able to help Region 3 take it to Region 3 after Yarnell Hill, and then help Region 8 put it on. And then I became on the cadre for Region 6. So pretty proud of that. That was super cool thing to be involved in.
That's a big
really
deal.
Like that.
That's a super big deal. I mean, being on that You Will Not Stand Alone, that's huge.
Yeah. Huge.
So personal question here on the You Will Not Stand Alone. You know how when you implement something new, especially people that are set in their ways, like firefighters, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, right? So did you experience a lot of pushback when you started that program up in Region 6? Like usually when you implement something new, I know there's usually a phase where there's a lot of like, not necessarily animosity, but like resistance to it. They like don't want to adopt a new thing. Then it kind of goes into an early adoption with a lot of feedback and pushback, I guess. And then it goes into like the full force storming, norming, forming, whatever that term is. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, when I took it in Region 5, then I helped Region 3 do it. And we didn't get any pushback. And then Region 6 was the first one, but I wasn't involved in that. But I heard about it, right? Mm-hmm. And they got quite a bit of pushback initially. Matter of fact, because I'll tell you, there's a unit on investigations, right? I end up teaching that now. But at the time, the Region 5 cadre goes up to Region 6 to put it on and train a new cadre, right? And they got major pushback because you're telling the employees their rights. This is what we're doing. We're informing you of your rights for an investigation. We're telling you what the policy is, but we're also telling you what you're entitled to as your rights as an employee if you're enduring this. And the regional office got really pissed because, there was a lot of bad stuff after 30 Mile, right?
Yeah.
And when Region 6 first did You Will Not Stand Alone, it was before TWISP, right? But it was still after 30 Mile. And there were people who lawyered up because they saw what happened after 30 Mile. Guy gets arrested.
What can you blame?
Job. Yeah. And so people are like, I ain't talking, right? And Region 6 worked really hard to try to overcome that. And they felt like that was going to tell the employees they didn't have to talk anymore. Well, they don't.
They never did.
Under certain circumstances, they don't. That's their right to know that. So there was, certain stretch of management who didn't like that. And then when I was trying to take it to Region 8, we got a little bit of pushback there. And then we were hearing, because I was on the steering committee, we were hearing that there were people in the Washington office who didn't like it, and I just were like, how can people not like this? How can people not support this thing where we're trying to prepare agency administrators, FMOs, to do right by their employees when they have something really bad happen to them? What in the world could be bad about that? But it's just people, it just, there's still, just like you said, there's going to be those people who would rather have a little bit of a culture of fear, or don't want people to just do what we tell you to do and not inform people of their rights. And I think that's just wrong. But You Will Not Stand Alone now has been in every Forest Service region. It's interagency. We've had state folks in, DOI, and it's now been to every region, every geographic area. And they're going to do it virtually this year for the first time because of the COVID.
Yeah.
And be able to get more people in that way, right? And
yeah, you might be able to have more adopters come on to that.
Exactly.
Especially with the age of COVID. It's like blessing in disguise with some things. I mean, obviously 2020 was kind of a shit show, but some good things came out of it. And that's the digital learning and the things like we're doing right now. I mean, for shit's sake, we're on Zoom. That's great.
Right.
It works.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to have somebody, you don't have to pay travel costs or whatever like that. So yeah, there's a lot of cool things, and embracing technology and using it to be effective.
Oh, absolutely. And pants are optional. I'm wearing pants.
Right. I'm wearing pants.
Oh, man. So now you've been pretty outspoken across your entire career. You don't take shit from people, and you speak up when something's wrong, when you feel it in your heart. And I know just anybody who does that is going to experience a lot of resistance. They're going to catch some shit for that. So as far as being an outspoken person, what would your recommendations be for that type of person? How would you get away with it? Like being outspoken?
I'll be honest. I wasn't really good at it at first because I was, there was anger behind it. Right.
Yeah. There's a lot of frustration, understandably so.
Right. Righteous anger. And so I didn't always, and I had a really good person who understood what I was trying to do and supported it, who pulled me aside and said, the message is being lost in your delivery. You're angry and you're passionate, and that's good to a degree, but you're alienating the people. That behavior, how you're presenting it, you're alienating people, and they're not listening to the message, right? That was a hard thing for me to hear, right? But that person knew that I needed to hear it because they believed in the message I was trying to tell. And so I had to really check myself and think about how I delivered a message like that. And the audiences are different. You talk about this, know your audience, whether you're telling a dirty joke, you're putting on a presentation, know your audience. And so, because in the fire world, we know we can be direct because we don't have a lot of time, blah, blah, blah. It comes off a lot better. But if I'm talking to an FLT or I'm talking to a room full of district rangers, they don't respond well to that.
Yeah.
Right. And I was putting people off by that. So then they weren't supporting and buying into the message. So I had to really kind of learn how to talk differently, how to, speak differently, calm myself down, not be as direct. And I think that's just having to learn that. So I think that's important too. Be outspoken, but understand that if you want people to hear your message, you got to think about your delivery. You got to think about your audience. You can't swear like a truck driver if you're talking to a bunch of district rangers, right?
Hard to do for a firefighter.
Yeah, exactly. That's different, And so also, it did affect aspects of my career. I didn't get jobs because of it that I had applied for, when people were willing to give me feedback or it was obvious. But also, I was able to find the people who saw that as a value, that I brought, right? That I was going to speak up, that I was going to call BS on something. And there are people who say they want that in an employee, and they may genuinely think they do, but a lot of people don't.
Yeah, they say that, but it's kind of like a lip service thing. It's like a formality of the interview or whatever.
Right. And so I was able to seek the people who genuinely valued that in me. And I didn't always land there. I sometimes landed in the place where this person said they did, but they didn't. And it had some effects on my career, and I pissed off some people. So what I tell people is you have to think about if you're willing to, if that is important enough to you to make then those kinds of sacrifices. And sometimes it will be, and sometimes it won't be. And that's okay. It's okay if it's not, right? But But if you can cultivate and find those mentors, find those supporters, find those supervisors who value that in you and allow you to do that, seek those people, seek that group, seek that wolf pack, find that wolf pack that likes that. And then if you don't, get yourself out of that situation. And like I said, there becomes, I never had a problem with being mobile. I was a dual career couple for many, many years. That's easier. And I didn't have children. So it was easy for me that if I had a shitty supervisor or crappy work situation, then I'd look for a better one.
Yeah.
But I know not everybody has that. And that may be the people that can't necessarily be as vocal or outspoken until there's a change in their management and to a new supervisor or a new district ranger or whatever. And so, you just kind of have to weigh that at what you're willing to do, how important it is to you. But I tell you what, I sleep well at night, right?
Clear conscious, probably.
Clear conscious. And I know that for me, if I'm speaking up for an employee, going to bat for them, that I'd rather have maybe that black mark against me than feel like shit because I didn't speak up, because because a lot of us, you go through, man, I wish I would have said something, man, I wish I would have spoke up, and that's a heavy thing to carry around for you, especially if it was kind of a big deal that you should have spoke up about. So it's one of the grassroots guys. I didn't even know who he was. Like, I still don't know his last name. And he's like, I'm a GS6. How are you able to be so outspoken on stuff? And didn't that mess up your career? And I had to tell him honestly, at some points it did. But again, I have a clear conscience. And also then I find I go to the place and and I look back and I'm like, I'm glad I didn't get that job. I'm glad I didn't end up working for that jerk who didn't value that in me. Right. That worked out for the best. So, yeah.
Yeah, you got to have the maturity to understand that too. And then also, I think it's really important to, not try and be willing to die on every hill.
Right.
Pick your battles. And the ones that matter.
Yeah. Right. And I had good mentors and supervisors who would ask me that.
Oh, yeah.
Is this the cause? You want to fall on the sword over this one? You want to die on the hill? And sometimes it was like, no. Because this other thing's more important. I'd rather die on the hill for that. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, having those people to check me, right. Put me in check, pull me aside. What are you doing? Is this worth it?
Yeah, it definitely comes with a maturity element too. It took me a long time because I was always a hothead and I was very outspoken. I was kind of a shithead, really. I mean, if I were to look back at when I was like, GS3 through probably 4.5, I wouldn't want to work with me. I was a piece of shit. But, it took one good mentor, my buddy Joe Bronson, former captain of mine. And he told me, is like, yeah, dude, you just got to, just pump the brakes. It's okay, man. You don't need to die on every hill.
Right. Right. Like I said, I was a hothead too, and I was righteous. And they're like, your message is lost. Right?
See, I wasn't righteous. I was just a dick. Oh man. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Oh, so as far as advice that you would give to people that are, either starting out or mid-career, I mean, what advice would you give them?
I would say for folks starting out, really be a sponge, be a student of fire, blah, blah, blah. But also then, move around, go work other places, be exposed to different things, different fuel types, right? Whether it's geography or fuel or whatever, people who think differently than you do. And even for people because we have people who start out in the agency and they already have a family, right? They already have a spouse. They might have a couple little kids, and they might not be. I've had veterans reach out to me on Facebook who are struggling navigating USA jobs, right? I'm not getting hired. I'm going to do this. And the first question I always ask is, are you mobile? Right. And so if you're mobile, that's easy then, expose yourself, go work, go into another region, get out of your comfort zone. see how things are done other places. If you're not mobile, there are certain things you still can do. Take a detail, right?
Oh, yeah.
Take a not to exceed 120-day detail. Or even, if they're flying 120-day, but you still have some family obligations that would make that difficult to be away that long, see if you can split it with somebody and do a 60-day, or, hey, would you let me go home, for a week or whatever. People, negotiate and ask for that. And so find those ways then, if you're not mobile, to still give yourself to work outside your comfort zone. What I try to do, because we have folks that come up in fire and they might have a degree in biology, right? Or wildlife or engineering. And it's like, hey, does anybody want to help wildlife for a month? Right. And so again, find those things that get you out of your comfort zone, expose you to different things, meet different people who think differently. That goes a long way. So that's probably the biggest advice. And then, also, find your wolf pack, find the people who value what you bring and fucking have fun, man. If people aren't laughing, like if I'm at work and my employees aren't laughing, I'm doing something wrong as a manager. Right. Yeah. I want it to be a fun place to work, and you get these heavy conversations, be safe out there and this, and like, go have some freaking fun, man. Go have fun with each other. Oh, best time of your life.
That and keep learning too. You brought up a great point there. Is like the day you stop learning about your job or anything in life is probably the day you should stop doing it.
Right.
It's honestly, especially as a firefighter, because you become wildly dangerous and complacent once you think you learned it all.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Ooh. Huge. That was a Paul Gleason thing. He coined that term, be a student of fire. Right. Yep. And that's a broad, that can mean so many things in there. Oh yeah. A student of all kinds of things about fire. Right.
It's pretty wild. So one thing I wanted to ask you is you're very involved with community service. And we brought up Assad, and it's just been bugging me. Now I got to ask you about it. So you and Assad are buds. You guys are homeboys. Yeah. Talk about Project Enlighten. That's pretty rad.
Yeah, it is pretty rad. And so Project Enlighten is a tiny little nonprofit organization that Assad Rahman and his wife Olivia started. And it started from Assad, being like a lot of firefighters back before he became a 26-0, a lot of firefighters like to travel in the off season, like major travel.
Like Southeast Asia?
Yeah, exactly. Thailand. World, go to Nepal, go to,
My buddy
and Assad was one of those. And so he was a big traveler, and he went to Cambodia with some buds, right? And buds off the hotshot crew. And they ran to these little kids, these street kids. A lot of them are missing limbs from the landmines because Cambodia was involved in the Vietnam War. And then also when the Khmer Rouge communist rule took over the country, and there were landmines everywhere. To this day, the countryside's riddled with landmines. And so a little kid gets blown up by a landmine. They're no longer of use to their family. They can't farm. They can't raise the chickens or whatever. And so many of them become orphans because their family, turns them out on the street. And so Assad befriended these kids and bought them food, bought them clothes, and just was really touched. And one of the boys drew him a picture, liked art, had a little stash under a rock of paper and like colored pencils. Mm-hmm. And he drew Assad a picture. And Assad could not get this kid out of his mind. A couple of years go by, he meets Olivia, they start traveling. He wants to take Olivia to these places that he's loved. They go to Cambodia. And they go to their tuk-tuk driver says, hey, you want to go to the Landmine Museum? They're like, what's that? Oh, it's this guy started this museum. He's a deminer, and he's got a little museum to raise money, and he takes in orphans who were affected by landmines. So they go, yeah, let's go. So they go to this landmine museum, and the pictures of the students that this guy's taken in, the orphans, there's this kid who drew the picture for Assad hanging on the wall. Yeah.
Wow.
2 years later. And Assad goes crazy because they're, oh my gosh, who's this? I need to see this kid. And they're all like, who's this big foreign guy asking about this kid?
He's not a small man either. He's probably what, 6'2"?
Yeah, I think he's 6'3", 6'4". He's a big man.
Yeah, he's not exactly inconspicuous.
Yeah. And so this kid was at school, and then he got out of school, and the other kids, hey, this barang, this foreigner's looking for you. So this kid comes in, and he's in a school uniform. He's going to school now. He's off the streets. And at first he doesn't remember Assad. And Assad's crushed because he's like, oh my God, running through the fields of flowers towards this kid. And the kid finally gets it and clicks. And he's like, you bought me ice cream. And Assad's like, yeah. And so then Assad's like, what is this magical little place that is taking you off the street and has put you in school? And got talking to him. And Assad's like, what can I do to help? And that's where Project Enlighten was born. And so the kids who attend school at the Landmine Museum, we then provide them scholarship opportunities to pursue whether they want to go to university, whether they want to go to a trade, nursing school, become a barber. I mean, something that just will continue education to further them so they can be, giving back to their community. And so that's our focus. We also help build schools. We're mainly do work in Cambodia, do a little bit in Laos. There's a guy off, I think, the San Bernardino, Puva. Puva's part of it too. We've built a school in his old village in Laos. And so, yeah, we're just a cool little group who do this on a side hustle, try and make the world a little bit of a better place. And I've always been so happy and honored to be a part of something like that. Yeah.
That's a very noble cause.
That other interest outside of this other life of fire, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can't just, there's a lot of things where I've seen a lot of people fall into that trap where their identity becomes fire. And I stress the importance of people like going out and doing something like you're doing or whatever drives their passion, because if that fire identity consumes you and that's all you are, oh man, it's not good. It's not good for your mental health.
It's not good for your physical health. It's like they leave the job and then become an AD, and they do that for 10 years and they look like they're 100 years old.
There is that. I mean, that's a good retirement plan. Or a lot of people go out and start their own companies and they just drive like a water tender or something like that. Or they have hand wash stations.
And that's okay too. But like you said, have some interests outside of that. Have another life outside of that.
Yeah, definitely don't let fire define you as a person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's a very noble cause, and yeah, I'm definitely interested in it. Definitely got to check out more of it, see what else you guys are up to. Are you guys going back to Cambodia anytime soon, or?
The last time I was there was 2000 and when was that? Like 12 or 13. Assad, I think it's been a couple of years. So we've been talking about that and going back. Obviously COVID, that's put us on hold.
Yeah. Thanks, 2020.
And there's an American couple who now help run the Landmine Museum who we're tied in with, and they live over there full time now, right? And so that helps kind of having some eyes for us too there, and what we can do to help support them, because it's really this joint effort, this marriage, where we support the larger mission of the Landmine Museum and the demining effort. Akira is the man who started it, and when he was a child, he was kidnapped into the Khmer Rouge army, and he set landmines. They had little kids do it because if they blew themselves up, they didn't care, right?
God, that is dark.
He did that as a child soldier, and then was able to get out of it, and always felt tremendous amount of guilt for that, even though he didn't have any choice. He's a child, and so he decided to make it his life's work to go back and make it right, and so demine, right? And so he's an amazing human being. He was up for a CNN Hero Award a couple of years ago. He didn't win it, but he got some recognition for that. So we're just really proud to be able to support that, and be just a tiny little piece of then. He's the one who took the kids off the streets. He's the one who started the school and gave them a home and gave them a family. And we're just the next step, to help them with education. So.
No, it's a very noble cause, and I applaud you for your efforts. That's one of a kind. You're the first person that I didn't even know Assad did it, and I saw it with you when I was doing the pre-interview, and I was just like blown away by what you guys are doing over there. I was like, holy shit, man! Because I know how bad the mine problem is over in that whole area. So there's millions, probably millions of unexploded ordnance, whether it be mines or the cluster bombs. I know that kids will like pick those up and think they're like, you know, a ball or something like that. And they'll, unfortunately, some of them will either be, some of them might be killed, or some of them will lose their arm or their leg, or it's a tragedy. It sucks.
Yeah, it does suck. You go over there as a tourist and they'll have those areas like roped off. Danger, landmines, don't go in here. You know, it's right in your face. You see it. It's crazy.
God, man. Sucks. Anyways, I hate to try and end the show on like a shitty note, but a good note at the same time, because you guys are doing great work over there. So silver lining. Wars, not so much of a great thing. But so getting to the end of the show, where can we get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you know, my blog, my essays are at rivaduncan.com. Pretty easy to remember. I'm on Facebook, Riva Duncan, Instagram at FireChick, FireChik. And then my email is just rivaduncan@gmail. If someone wants to drop me a Gmail, happy to talk or help or anything I can do, answer questions. So pretty easy to get a hold of.
Perfect. And also, I'm trying to, I think I'm going to drop a little hint right here, but I might be starting like a mentor-mentee program through Anchor Point. Would you happen to be interested in that?
Yeah, very cool. Totally be down with that.
All right. So we can get a hold of you there. And of course, rivaduncan.com. And if you guys haven't checked out her essays, all of them, because they're all great, go check them out, especially the People on the Edge of the Night. And we don't need another forestry technician hero. Forgot the hero part last time. Parts 1 and 2. And speaking of which, you are a Backbone contributor.
Yeah. I think as of yesterday, right?
Yep.
Super awesome. Really excited.
This lined up like perfectly.
I know. And it was super cool because that's an awesome effort that Mystery Ranch is doing, and Luke. And so I was really excited to be one of the contributors. So super awesome. Great cause. And I was pushing it on my home unit, trying to get folks to put in for one of those. And so, hope they get a lot of interest. Yeah,
hopefully it takes off. I'm sure it will.
Oh, yeah.
I know a lot of people are kind of apprehensive to, just dive right into it. Because like we said in the episode, fear of reprisal, which is very real, clear. And it's a danger. So,
right.
But well, thank you for being on the show. But one last thing is at the end of the show is I like to give you the opportunity to give a shout out to a homie, a hero, mentor. Could be multiple. Take it away.
Yeah, man, there's so many, long career, and a lot of people helped me get to where I am. But I would say, obviously, being on the Asheville Hotshots really, really changed the trajectory of my career. And Dick Kassler, still friends with him to this day. He's retired on the coast of North Carolina. He and his wife are very good friends of mine. And he was awesome and really a great mentor. And the foreman, Steve Little, then I was able to hire him. He ran Asheville Hotshots, and then I was able to hire him as my assistant forest FMO in North Carolina. And he's freaking awesome. Hung in there with me, taught me a lot. The guy's one cool customer, man. He's just cool. And then when I went to the Klamath, that was another turning point. Really found probably my favorite wolf pack there. And Jay Perkins, like I said, I would never step foot in California. I would never work in Region 5 because it was post-consent decree. I vowed not to do it. And then when I was in Utah, I didn't like my supervisor. My sole goal for my next job was I was looking for a good supervisor. And that drew me into Region 5, into the Klamath, Jay Perkins, and probably the best supervisor I've had in my career. And loved my time in Region 5. And he retired. He's a good friend of mine to this day. Just talked to him on the phone last week, and has made me a better, supervisor, manager, human being. So Jay Perkins.
Awesome. Well, Riva, thank you so much for being on the show. And when's your next works of writing coming out?
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. I'm thinking about that. And so hopefully before the end of the month is up.
Perfect. There we go. We'll be on the lookout
looking for a new essay.
Well, right on, Riva. Well, thank you very much for being on the show, and we'll hopefully get you on here again.
Yeah, thanks for what you're doing, Brandon. Really appreciate it, and love what you're doing in the grassroots, man. Keep it up.
Hey, you guys are steering the ship on the Anchor Point podcast, and anybody can join the efforts for grassroots. Just saying, throwing it out there.
Right.
Shameless plug.
Sign up.
All right, Riva. Well, have a good night. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
See ya.